Hey everybody, I'm here with Norm and Jen Jennings from At Stake Ministries, and At Stake Ministries was extremely helpful to me and my wife when we were going through a rough time. We went and saw them, and I know a lot of you have gone and seen them, so welcome. I'm glad you guys are here today. Why don't you tell us really quickly what At Stake Ministries does?
So we come alongside youth, we come alongside marriages, which is obviously the topic that you're talking about today, individuals with struggles or that just want to improve their lives and walk with the Lord.
I just want to pick your brain a little bit since you have dealt with so many different marriages. What is one of the things that helps prevent bitterness from creeping into a marriage?
That's a very good question. And we have found that really initially there has to be safety within the couple. So the safety for my husband to be able to express himself, to share the things that are going on in his heart, and the same for me. That safety is not there, then the openness, that conversation isn't there. And then there's not that intimacy of really knowing the other person's heart and being able to connect on that way. So I would say safety is first, very important.
When you say safety, are you talking just physical or emotional or all kinds?
Right. I was thinking more of the ability for each other to just really receive what the words are. I'm not talking about like verbal abuse or anything like that, but just sharing of each other's heart without criticism. There can be questions and comments or anything like that, but just being able to really share what's going on. So if he, maybe approached something that I was doing at it had a different take on it, then, instead of me jumping in and being defensive about that, just, asking a question, hey, so this is how I took that. Is that what you meant? Or, just being able to be open to ask those questions at the time of, whatever's going on. So just that, but that was the openness of the ability that I can go to him and talk and know that he loves me no matter what. The benefit of the doubt is always there. He's loving me with the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what needs to be there first for a person, I think, really to be able to be open and share.
And I think I'd add to that it can be physical safety. It can be all of those things. And if we remember that our overall goal is to attempt to walk through this fallen world in a way that the Lord described it to happen, then we're going to have the blessings of the Lord. And so if the fall is involved and there is verbal yelling, okay, well, somebody's going to feel unsafe. And we call that verbal abuse, and it shouldn't exist. It would not have existed in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time, of course, there's not going to be openness, and there's not going to then be the intimacy that God really designed. So I think what Jen is describing is a really good premise that we have to enter the Lord then into what needs to be cleaned up. Why? Why is that spouse not allowed to speak? Or in the extreme cases that there's been a big injustice or transgression, how do we get the Lord in the midst of that to heal and to restore so that we can move in a safe way to openness and rebuild intimacy?
So each person in the couple really needs to work on kind of creating a space for the other person to share, for the other person to bring their concerns. Why do you think if we don't do that, bitterness starts to grow?
Bitterness is just a form, to me, bitterness seems to be a form of flesh. When I am self-focused and not fighting that and not loving on others and making them more important, then pride can sneak in, greed can sneak in, envy can sneak in, and then the enemy doesn't even really have to have his way. Then my feelings are hurt because then Jen didn't listen to me and wants to head in a different direction. So I think that ability to keep the bitterness out and to have the openness to go, like Jen just said, is that what you meant when you said that? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, not at all. And then you can keep bitterness at bay. And I believe that's why the Lord told us to forgive.
Yeah.
It's just as much for me to forgive Jen as it benefits Jen. It just keeps the relationship right.
And in James, it talks about why do you fight and quarrel with each other? It's desire to be right, and that's, like you said, the flesh. We just have that desire to one up or be right or, whatever, the pride. And so I think that that's just that flesh side.
Absolutely. Do you think the bitterness always, 'cause there's different couples who are going to watch this in different places in their marriage, and bitterness can be really damaging to a relationship. Do you think bitterness always feels like hatred, or do you think sometimes it feels like numbness to the other person? Or can people be bitter without realizing it, or are you going to always be aware of it? How's that work?
Well, yes. I hear bitterness in a lot of those things. Oftentimes we're blinded to it. I work with a lot of men through anger issues, okay? And because that was my stronghold. And bitterness is behind anger issues. But also there's an acute sense of injustice. So we could be around something that is wrong or had our boss treat us in a way that was wrong. And we can even have the bitterness towards our boss and then roll up on the house and be carrying that bitterness around. And it's got our mind thinking and believing things that aren't truth. So then when our spouse says something, of course we're going to hear it wrong, or the enemy is going to cause us to hear it wrong. And then all of a sudden that bitterness from something that happened at 8:30 in the morning is there in the midst of that. And the Lord gives us easy ways to handle forgiveness and to keep bitterness at bay. So yeah, I think it can sneak in all of those different personality ways.
Yeah. Easy ways. The Lord gives us easy ways to keep bitterness at bay. All right. What are those easy ways?
Do you want to?
Well, I think in the beginning is we've heard it say you just keep wipe the slate clean. So you keep your list short. So if there's something going on, just address it, and that's not natural for me because as we learned when we went through our own counseling many years ago is I'm the avoider. I would much rather bury it under the rug or just walk away from it. And he's the one who is pursuing in order to resolve the issues because I think that if we just connect, it'll just be fine. He loves me.
And then I think if we just resolve it, it would be fine.
Right. Well, but that doesn't always mesh well. And so that is one thing that I've had to really stretch is being able to connect and to have those hard, difficult conversations. And he has had to allow me the space to not do it wrong or right, but as I'm learning how to, because sometimes it could be critical or sometimes it could come out, with maybe not the best intentions, but give me the space to knowing that I love him, to allow the Lord just to work with me verbally because I didn't practice my verbal emotions as, when I was a kid or growing up as a young adult or anything. So that's something I've had to learn in marriage. Lucky man. But, and so he's had to give me space in order to stumble and fall and give me grace, and then vice versa. When it's too strong and I just want to go run and hide, he needs to pull back so that I have a moment to, because he's much faster at verbal processing than I am. I'd rather sit and think a little bit, or I don't even know what I'm thinking about. I don't even know what happened. And so I just need time. And so we've just had to give each other space with that. So I think learning each other, and really accepting the other person, it's not right or wrong. It's their bent. You love them. You fell in love with them. And that's part of what you love about them. And so just love them where they're at. It's what we do with our kids, know.
So what I would like to encourage everybody that's listening to this right now is that Jen and I don't have it all figured out. And that could be such a misconception of like, well, that's Norm and Jen. They've learned all of this and everything is perfect. Marriage is the ultimate instrument of sanctification for the Lord. And I am not like Christ yet. And Jen isn't either. Right. But I always say the Lord looks upon favor with me because Jen is so much like Christ. But if we bear that in mind, which that's our job here on earth, we're going to continually be transformed more and more in the image of Christ as long as we're in his hands. Then what we don't need is to go to like big fancy tools first that can overwhelm us, and they can even become an idol. We are biblical counselors, so we go into the Word first and into prayer first and with the Lord first, and then we go to other tools that He's revealed to us. So what I mean by that is Corinthians 3. Okay, Corinthians 3 paints a picture that when our hearts towards each other are filled with love and gentleness and kindness and all of that, you would think that it would then say, you've achieved a perfect marriage, right? But then it says, bear with one another.
Colossians 3, babe.
It's Colossians 3.
It's
What'd I say?
Corinthians
3. I would have had to say first or second.
Yeah,
Wouldn't I?
you would
Yeah,
have.
yeah. So Colossians 3. Yeah. So everybody that's looking through the Bible right now, thank Jen. She reeled you in right. And so then even after that, it said forgiving one another. Okay. So practically what it looked like for Jen and I is we had a car down at Bingston's to get a tire changed, and we had another car at Auto Glass getting a windshield replaced after a big hailstorm. And we just walked up and down Santa Fe. And we just really talked about, like, what are the challenging things that you're having to bear with me? And oftentimes those are the things that I wish the Lord would just hurry up and sanctify, because I don't like them either.
Yeah.
And so then we're connected, we're unified, and we can go on loving each other. And a lot of times, honestly, we probably don't even need to bring those things to our spouse. We can probably just say, Lord, thank you for giving me your word and your spirit, so that in the terms of Jen, I can just bear with Norm and all that going on. And I know that's just not a part of your character in him.
And that assumes humility in your spouse. So like if your spouse is not able to identify or isn't self-aware and is defensive, then that's probably not going to go very well. But with openness, then you're able to have that honest communication and conversation about that.
Yeah. And if you got two people in a marriage that's kind of shut down, I mean, it might take time to create that safe place and that openness, right? You can't just go in guns blasting. We're going to be open to each other today, right? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
sit down so we can be open.
I know. So, and that's the forgiveness part. I mean, someone has got to yield. Somebody's got to have that humility just to say, you know what, for us to move forward, I've got to yield. I've got to render forgiveness, whether they're asking it or not, and then practice it, walk it out. And that other person, hopefully the Lord, if they're a believer, the Holy Spirit can grab a hold of their heart and convict them of that and have them to really appreciate, because that's what Christ did for us, just appreciate that forgiveness and then humble themselves and then ask for it if there's other things or whatnot, and then be able to walk forward. But it's that to forgive somebody is a big responsibility, because that means you have to walk it out and not just harbor it. Say, I forgive you in words only, but you got to forgive in words and action.
Yeah. Boy, I often share this story about a time when I was arguing online with someone, which is always productive. And we were debating back and forth, and I really want to nail this person on the point they made. And I was typing up responses. I'm going to get them good on this one. And before I submitted my comment, a comment from them popped up, and it said, wow, Jeff, you're just really smart and very persuasive in this whole thing. And immediately I deleted everything I just written. I thought, wow, they're actually pretty nice. It just, reminds me of what you were talking there. Like if we want our spouse to be responsive to us and to help create a safe space for us, we really need to do that with them, because I can't force you to create a safe space for me. But what I can do is I can be forgiving and humble towards you.
That's a really good word. You know what the Lord brings to my mind while you're saying that is just he says it in Proverbs and echoes it in Psalms. And he's like, to your enemy, if they're thirsty, give them water, and if they're hungry, give them food. And by this, you're going to heap coals on their head, which I don't get that, it feels like that would be painful. But in that way, you're going to just show love to them. And then I think, wow, am I always in that mode with my kids, with my friends, with my coworkers, with my spouse.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear when you said that is like on those types of exchanges, the Lord can do so much diffusion
Yeah.
when we just submit into that. So Jen was talking about forgiveness, and people ask, what does that look like? Okay, Lord's ways are simple, not complex. I'm sure there's a book that would teach us how to apologize using 101 practical steps or something like that, right? But I didn't realize how what I had been taught growing up, and maybe what Jen had been taught growing up, was not the Lord's model in this until we went through our own intensive counseling. And I was taught, out on the schoolyard, you've got these two kids and you're going to apologize to each other. Say you're sorry, say you're sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, and then you walk away angry, frustrated. The injustice is still there and all of that. And so that's what I was exposed to. And Ron was the name of the man that counseled with us. And Ron said the Lord's way is actually to go to Jen and say, when last year, when it was your birthday, I'm trying to make something up because I never do anything that I need to ask for forgiveness
It's
for.
hard.
It's hard finding an example of that.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
So, when the windshield washers weren't working on your car and I forgot about it week after week, this is true.
That is true.
And you were living through the dirty windshield. That wasn't saying how much I love you and value you. And I just would ask that you would choose to forgive me for forgiving and forgetting something that's so important.
Yeah, I forgive you for that. I already forgave you for that.
Yeah, I know. And they work now. Too,
They do.
right?
It's when I don't have to go through the car wash to get them clean.
But what do you do when she says, I'm not ready to forgive you yet?
That's a great question.
It is.
And when we're modeling this with kids and families, it's so you have to leave them with the ability to feel safe. Okay. And so if Jen would say, well, that was the reason for the accident after all, and I'm not ready to forgive you, then I have to lean back in the Holy Spirit and say, give me strength. Because if I'm honest, at that point in time, my flesh wants to rise up and say, well, I poured my heart out to you, and there you are. And so I have to lean back into the Lord's strength. And then I have to say, know that my heart really wants the forgiveness. I want us to put it behind. And so when you're ready, will you please come and let me know?
And then it's my responsibility to go to him when the Lord's worked on my heart and I can get over myself and then go to him and say, yeah, I do forgive you for that. It was inconvenient, but I'm just grateful that you were able to fix it and we didn't have to go take it to a shop.
Yeah.
Because I created the injustice, right? So the forgiveness is going to allow me to feel better. But the world's way is for me to just say, I'm sorry. Hey, sorry, I forgot your windshield washer thing for a couple weeks and then walk on. Okay.
So you're recognizing the
Her
impact you had and her needs.
And then I can't force it if it's not there at the time. I just have to love her and say, okay, I want you to be able to do that. And inside I know that I want her to be able to do it so she's not carrying it around and there's not other interactions or relationships or relationship with the Lord or any of that then struggles because of me.
And that goes back to just receiving each other where we're at. That safety, knowing that I can, if I'm not ready to forgive him, I have the space to do that. I'm able to say, I just can't right now. But I will come back to you when I'm ready.
Okay. But what about when he's never recognized that he didn't change the windshield wipers and you're still upset about it? What do you do?
Then the Lord teaches us about forbearance, and that's what Christ did for us on the cross, because I never had the opportunity to ask for forgiveness for him to do that for us at the time. Of course, I have now, but I have to just choose to forgive him at where he's at and just not want to hold on to that. part of that is too with history. Like, he has fixed so many different things in our household that we have not had to hire a variety of different, handymen to fix things. And so then that's, I've got my own Tim Allen, but,
Some people won't catch
I
that
know,
reference,
we're getting
a few
old.
decades ago.
Everyone
Yeah.
over 40 will get it. That's fine.
Yep. Tim the Toolman Taylor. Anyway, so that's one of those where I have to just go back and say, you know what? I know he's been busy. I know he's had all of these other things. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt with that. And I'm just so grateful that, he was able to fix it, even though it took a little longer. I'm thankful it wasn't a year,
Yeah.
So it's just being grateful in the moment of the circumstances of that it did get met. And the Lord doesn't always give us things that we want in our own time frame anyway. And so I just being able to extend that, knowing that even though he didn't say, I'm sorry about that or ask for my forgiveness, that it doesn't mean that he's not sorry.
Yeah.
And so as Jen's saying that, something that comes to mind, again from the Lord's Word, that did not make sense to me when I first read it not too long ago, is it's to the Lord's pleasure that he conceals a matter. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm like, well, that sounds like avoiding something. And that's not at all what it said. And we know that our Lord is the one true judge, that our Lord will set everything into righteousness according to his time and all of that. But I think what it's saying, and it didn't go on to say, so I'm taking a little bit of liberty here, is like in the case of something between Jen and I, especially where there's not been forgiveness, but I feel just in general, I shouldn't run and tell that. Okay? That was in this relationship, and I believe the Lord's saying it's good for that matter as the Lord's healing it, or you're reaching out and getting counseling, or you're meeting with the pastor, that we conceal that matter. As soon as we start to share it, then the enemy's going to get involved.
And when you say share it, are you talking about share it with each other, share it with others, share
it with others? Mm-hmm. So like, this thing that we've created and used an example. So then Jen didn't, and so what I have to be on guard for is like the enemy would tell me, hey, when you go to men's group, what you need to do is say, brothers, I need your prayer. I did it right. I came to my wife. I requested forgiveness. I'm dealing with all of this pain. Would you guys pray over me? This is such a tough situation. And that's of no value, especially in a group setting like that. Yeah. Because that's hers.
Yes.
And that can potentially really destroy the safety.
Which really goes against what the world suggests we do. We actually talked about this in the sermon last week, how right now the world says, hey, everything that's inside of you, you have to bring that out to be your true self. And that's not always true. There are some things that are better just left between you as a couple and not shared with all of your accountability, all 15 of your accountability partners in your growth group.
Right.
That's a good word. Yeah, and it does give us some healthy reflection there. Nora was created solely for an intimate relationship with the Lord. Okay, so when I lean into that relationship, then he might point me to go and sit with Pastor to talk it over. He's certainly going to send me first to the person that the issue's with. So I'm talking to Jen first. And then I feel it would only be right with her to go, I still need to unpack this further and need somebody to talk to you. Do you mind if I go and talk with Pastor, or whatever? And then I think we're making a cord of three strands in that situation, and the Lord can protect over that.
I mean, it's like Matthew 18, where you go to a person one-on-one first. If that doesn't work, then you can bring a couple others in the situation. And that's talking about excommunication in the church, but the principle from Jesus still applies, right? Where you deal with that person. You usually don't need to go get advice from 10 people about how to handle this bad situation.
Right, because then it's on the others. It's on God. It's gossiping.
Yeah.
And then it tears down. And then I don't want anybody's view of my husband to be less than, what it really truly is. I don't want him to think poorly of him, because that really speaks poorly of me.
And that goes back to the safety thing. I mean, if your spouse also knows that you're there to help protect their reputation, I mean, that's a big deal too.
Because we're one.
Yeah.
Because it's my reputation too. It's not just his.
It also helps to protect us from the fact that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to deliver a word of truth with love to a brother or sister. You know, oftentimes we want to share what's going to pick their spirits up or make them feel good or whatever.
Yeah.
So it keeps us out of that danger zone because we're more than likely going to hear from somebody what they feel that we need to hear to be in a better place as soon as the conversation's over.
Absolutely.
And the Lord may be putting us through a trial.
Yeah.
And so that really helps us to avoid those type of pitfalls.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear for everybody in my church that when we're talking about sometimes you conceal a matter, sometimes you just deal with your spouse only, we're not talking about a spouse who's punching you in the face. Proverbs actually says, and this is one I've repeated to people many times, if you rescue an angry person, you'll have to do it again.
And again,
right?
and again, and again.
So,
yes.
so you have someone who has anger issues that can't contain those. That needs to be dealt with by someone other than just you by yourself.
Absolutely.
But in these internal matters of forgiveness and where's my heart, a lot of that can be fixed by dealing with the person rather than bringing it out to other people.
Yeah, that's a great word. Behind us is the stage, and maybe they can't see it because it's a blue screen. I don't know, but behind us is the stage for Sunday, and Norm should not be on that stage with an instrument or a microphone in front of him. Okay, I'm just not gifted for the Lord in that way. So when I heard you just like reassuring the congregation, there are those situations. We live in a fallen world, and there are those within the body that have been equipped. And that's part of their gifting for the Lord to speak in just as much as whoever is playing the guitar on Sunday and moving our heart to worshiping the Lord. So I totally echo that for everybody that out there, that don't hide whatever is not right. The Lord is going to have you reach out to have that safety.
Absolutely.
And that just is the starting point that Jen had us to in the beginning of this.
Great.
We have to do those things to create safety.
Making sure to be asking each other questions. If you're feeling that hair on the back of your head stand up because you're wanting to get defensive, then you start asking questions on, is that how you intended? Just because that's how I heard it. Did you mean to say that? Or, because that's how I heard it. And so just being open to ask those questions, I think is that's the biggest diffuser. I think also just stopping and praying. If your spouse is willing to, just you grab their hands and just like, let's just submit this rest of this conversation to the Lord and ask for him to guide us in it, because I'm feeling really angry or hurt or whatever, and then just allowing him to meet us there and be present in that. And I think that's the biggest diffuser right there.
Yeah, so I would say that along the lines of just thinking, is there safety in our relationship? Okay, and then is there openness? When you get to the stage of openness, then couples are going to need to do everything that they can do to take care of that, and then the intimacy, and so what that would look like, and what that looks like for Jen and I is, well, one time we kind of said, gosh, we need a date night. We looked at our calendar and we're like, we don't even have time to have a date night. I'm sure there's people out there that are saying the same thing, and 3 different kids and 3 different places to be, and wrestling and volleyball and all of those kind of things, and then we realized, hey, wait, we go to those things together. The Lord has actually given us date nights all the time. We're just not utilizing them that way. And so then we started to be intentional, and the Lord does want us to be intentional. And so what that looked like is we just started asking each other intimacy questions. And when somebody comes to the ministry center, we'll give them these and tell them to create more on their own. But the questions look like, so what are you most thankful for right now? And then I would just listen. I'd just listen to Jen say from her heart all those things. And then she'll turn around and ask me that same question. And then we have one of like, what are your worries and concerns? And she hears a lot from me about my worries and concerns. I'm worried about what our kiddos have to face, what they're pressured into in the world now that I didn't have to. I mean, I had to decide whether I was going to cruise on Santa Fe or whether I was going to go to work.
Yeah.
Okay. A life of a 16-year-old is completely different and overwhelming now. And then the government, doesn't matter who's in charge, but, and then, being able to pay the tax, all of those kind of things. And then I would share, and then she would share. And then
there's dreams and desires. What are your dreams and desires? And vice versa. And that's not really a time to, you can ask maybe a clarifying question, but it's really more about just sharing all of those things, the things that are not practical that we may never be able to financially, do or participate in, but just sharing. It's that heart of the little girl, all these little things that actually had a really cool dream that I thought, oh my gosh, that would be so fun. This morning, I remember my dream about it, and I haven't even told you about this yet, but okay, so one of our bucket list things is like to have an RV. And then when our kids are dispersed among the country, we are just going to go camp, totally do the National Lampoon's Vacation thing,
absolutely.
And just be right in front of their house and park there for like a month or 2.5. This is like what. And so what my dream was is that there was actually, we had a flatbed, and then there was like an itty bitty little camper on top that was for our grandson, who's like a year and a half.
That's awesome.
And then we were pulling our other trailer. So it was like, looked like this little parade.
I know,
he totally had his own.
Okay.
Yeah, it was so cute, and it was just bright colored and everything. So it was just like that, just that fun opportunity just to be able to dream. And they can be completely stupid like that, or it can be, true. Really, I want my kids to really come to their own relationship with the Lord. I want them to not just adopt ours, but to have their own time where they desire to go to church, and they desire to go to a life group or a grow group, or, to be in their own community. They desire, those kind of things. Or, it could be, I really wish, eggs were a dozen again, that kind of thing. So it's just really the opportunity.
If I were king for a day.
I know. It's, if I could run the school for the day. Remember when the kids had to write that.
Yeah.
But, and then there's,
the next one that means a lot to us is, what things about you do you wish the Lord would hurry up and change?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so
about ourselves,
not your spouse.
Right.
Okay, don't share that about your spouse. But it is. It's and that brings Jen into my real struggles of like, I wish the Lord would just finish the sanctification on this, because I don't like when I'm that guy, I don't like struggling with that or whatever. And then that brings us tight in prayer, and we know how to pray for each other. And then the last one is, what are you willing to do, or what do you want to do? So based on what we heard from the other person, the things that actually stuck, because you're not necessarily taking notes or anything, it's just, what are you willing to do? I'm willing to start saving for that RV and that flatbed trailer so that we can have an extra, or whatever. And then just whatever. So it's that's the rubber meets the road, is what we say, question and based on what we heard. And that can change too, based, if you do that once a month or a couple times a month or whatever. But it's a good start. And so in closing that, I think what we're encouraging is we've got so much inside the space inside ourselves. Okay. And so much of it, even like desires, I desire to go to Germany, where my mom was from, and see that area. Financially, will we ever do it? It's probably never going to happen unless the Lord makes that work. And I realized that I never shared that with my wife. A lot of the things that irritate me about myself that I wish the Lord would make me more like Jesus in, I never shared that with myself. And so, the awesome part about connecting like that is that helps with all of that in the inside, and you're not having the dialogue with yourself. And you're not having the dialogue partially with the enemy and you not even knowing it, or me not even knowing
Right.
it. Like, well, I'd like to do that, but
She'll never let me.
yeah, she'll never want to change the budget to that. And then we'll never have a bass boat,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm just Mr. Pouty Pants all the time.
You know, one time I was telling my wife, I said, my four-wheeler just doesn't work like it used to. I just go buy a new four-wheeler. And she said, well, if you think that's really the best use of our money, then I actually would support that. And she was dead serious. And like all this stuff inside that I was saying to myself, oh, she wouldn't want me to have that, and blah, blah. Like it just kind of like flew the coop at that point.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's the way that couples would protect. When you've got that openness, and sometimes during openness, a person might hear a wrong thing, you know, or whatever. And that's where Jen is phenomenal at backing up and going, okay. When I heard that, when you said that, I thought, well, maybe he's trying to deliver a message to me, or maybe that's something against what I had done earlier or whatever. Is that, oh no. And so you're keeping the slate clean, as she had said, and you're just connecting at a heart level with the one that the Lord gave us to share our spirit with. I mean, we're supposed to be one in spirit. And so how are we going to reap the blessings of the Lord when we're two spirits that are kind of divided, but every once in a while we're connected?
Yeah.
That's not his plan.
Wow.
And so seek it and do it and live in it, and then deal with all the stuff from the fallen world as you're going through it.